was one of the first things I ever bought in my woodworking career. In fact, one of my first videos was how to do center keyed box joints, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is my favorite type. This was my first woodworking project that used box joints, and that was 8 years ago. Ever since then, I've wanted to design and develop a better box joint jig. This thing is way too expensive, complicated, and is missing some features that I think would make a box joint jig great. So I think I've accomplished that, and today I want to take you through that process, how I designed, developed, and how we manufacture this little behind the scenes look at what we do here. We don't often show that on this channel, and you'll get to see the new Katz-Moses manufacturing facility, which is right here in this shop. Pretty incredible to see. So why don't you come onto the bench, let me show you what we've done and how we go about making these and getting them to you. Whenever we start product development, I ask myself a few questions. One is, can I compete? It wouldn't make sense for me to make a table saw or a sander. What problem am I trying to solve, and is it possible? And that third question, is it possible? That can only be solved through prototyping and product development, because you don't know until you've designed it and gotten it to the best place it can be whether it's possible to make. So let's head over to the table saw, and let me show you what problems I wanted to solve and how we solved them, and then we'll head into manufacturing. That second question, what problem are we trying to solve, is the key component to product development. And in this case, there was a few for me that I had big gripes. All of my products have come from annoyances or gripes that I had. The stop block, it was because everything else on the market would move 1/8 of an inch. The dovetail jig was because dovetails were too hard, so I wanted an easier way to do it. And with this, there's a couple things. First was cost. It is too expensive for the average woodworker to justify for something that does one thing. That was a big one. Obviously, it's a very nice piece of equipment. I'm not gonna knock the build quality of this, it's great. But two was a really big one for me. I barely used this because it was so complicated. It has 2 adjustment knobs that are not labeled. That was my biggest gripe. It's like, why don't you engrave these things? So when I would get it out, if I hadn't used it in a couple months, I'd have to watch a YouTube video, read the instructions. That'd take half an hour, and then test cuts. The way that it works, it's just a pain in the butt to get dialed in. So I would spend an hour doing test cuts. In fact, you can see all these right here from one project where I was trying to dial something in. It was a pain in the butt. So the problems I wanted to solve were a few things. One, it had to be accurate and easy to use. For this, we guarantee that you can get perfect box joints with 1 test cut or less. You need to have stock sizes, so it has 4 stock sizes. You could make your own as well. It need to be easy to assemble. So this is the second in our Katz-Moses flat pack line. First being the router table, which has been hugely successful because it's very easy to put together. We have a great step-by-step video that people get when they order it, and it walks you through the whole process, tells you how to get it perfect and how to use it. So easy to assemble, we knocked that out of the park. My other gripe was this key is not removable, so you can't do center keyed box joints, which I think are the best way to do box joints. Box joints are so beautiful because you get the end grain and long grain in the same joint, and so you get dark light, it looks very 3D, but to make them look great, the problem is that you get a odd shaped key at the end, right? Unless you plan the width of your dado stack perfectly and the width of your material, you're gonna get one odd shaped key at the end. And so I created a way, I don't know if I created it, but the way that I prefer to do it is called center keyed box joints, where you get this big key in the middle. This is incredibly easy to do this because the keys are removable. So come on in here, let me show you how we solved some of those problems and why this is so cool. The first thing that I wanted to solve was it being universal. So the base piece has slots in it for attaching your runner any distance from your dado stack, because there's a specific place you need to adjust it, which is why we put this alignment line here. So the inside of your dado stack needs to go there, and then the assembly video walks you through how to fit it to any table saw. So it's accurate because you set it up in a certain place. And then from there, we have 4 stock sizes. This is 1/2 inch, this is 5/8, and then we have 3/8 and 1/4. And all of these pieces are reversible. So this is your burn piece, this is your 0 clearance insert. That's reversible, so it has 2 sides. And then these are reversible so that you can do the multiple stock sizes. Then it comes with these removable keys. These acrylic pieces are dialed in, they're so accurate, and because we CNC these pieces and laser cut these, we can get them to work really well together. But this is where the accuracy comes into play, and this is how we can guarantee that you get perfect box joints in 1 test cut or less. And this is, I think, one of the coolest features, along with this micro adjustability. All right, so this is something I'm super proud of. We were able to make this super accurate with these stock sizes. You get 4 of them, the 1/2 inch, 5/8, 3/8, and 1/4 inch. You can obviously make your own, but these acrylic keys that come with it in those 4 stock sizes, you get 2 of each. So we cut them on the CNC, and this piece of MDF here is exactly 0.5 inches in this case, and this is 0.5 inches, your dado stack's 0.5 inches. So if you take it when you're doing your setup here, I'm gonna back everything off, you can take it and just butt it right up against that key. I've found that, you know, backing it off just a hair is perfect, and you're exactly 0.5, 0.5, 0.5, which is what a box joint is. If you've eaten this up or you wanna just be a little bit more accurate, you can use the other opposing key, just like that, and that's gonna allow you to get almost a perfect cut your first time. Might be a little too tight, a little too loose, but that's okay. So like these are way too tight. Now, if I wanted to fix that, I can look to the side here. This is my micro adjust, and like my gripe with the IBox, how they didn't label things, this is labeled. It's got a smaller square for tighter, a bigger square for looser. And the way this works is this knob locks this in. You butt it right up against your MDF when you've made a test cut. And because we want to go looser, we want to turn it this way. This is a quarter 20 bolt, which means 20 threads per inch. That means each thread is 0.025 inches. So a full turn is 0.025 inches. That's a massive adjustment. When you're doing box joints, I usually do a third of a turn if I'm pretty close. So I just loosen everything up since I need to tighten this bolt, which is going to loosen the joint. Loosen everything up. I loosen this knob. I'm just going to tighten it, you know, a quarter turn, which looks like this. You can see it moved this way. Lock that back down, move everything back into place, make another cut, and you should be just dialed. If you're too loose and you want to get real crazy with it, you can use a feeler gauge to stick it in the gap and see exactly how much that gap is, turn your bolt accordingly. But usually if you're just a little bit loose, a quarter to a third of a turn is going to fix you right up, and you're going to get perfect box joints. The other way that this makes getting perfect box joints a breeze is center keyed box joints. Like I talked about earlier, these are center keyed box joints. They're my preferred method of doing box joints because you get even keys. I have a great video, which I'll link down below, that explains the whole process, but this is what they look like in their raw form. Is you got a big open area here and then a big key in the center. The way this is gonna work is you're gonna start your box joints like normal, and I have a video that it will be linked below that explains this in great detail. You're gonna make a couple cuts, normal way, then you're gonna flip it around. Make a couple cuts the normal way, and then that's gonna leave you with a huge piece in the middle. Then you're gonna count those, you're gonna do the same thing the other way, you're gonna do a couple, boom, flip them both around, boom, boom, boom. But what the problem is, that's gonna leave you with a chunk here of, you know, some size that's smaller than your keys, and you can't clear that out unless you use a chisel. But with this box joint jig, you can just pull out the key like this, and then you can slide it anywhere, and that just makes this a sled. You already have your zero clearance, so you're not worried about tear out. You can just clean that out, and then you're gonna get perfect fitting joints like that. So that's some of the benefits and problems that we solve with this box joint jig. Let's head out to the warehouse and see how it's made and talk about some of the product development and manufacturing development we did. Welcome to the Katz-Moses manufacturing facility. We've done a lot of upgrades since the last time I showed you this warehouse. We got rid of the Phantom. We now have 3 Laguna Fanic Elite SUV CNCs. We got a Laguna 15 horsepower dust collector. We have a time saver wide belt sander that we're putting in. We have 3 180 watt best cutter lasers. We're not sponsored here, just I'm saying their names because I love these machines. We paid for all of them, and we do a lot of manufacturing here. This is where we make the router table, the box joint jig. Tamar's router jig is made here, which is fantastic, by the way. We make templates for multiple content creators actuators. We do the CNC dovetail alignment board, and a lot of other things are made right behind you here in our warehouse. So let's talk a little bit about how the equipment works for manufacturing and how that's allowed us to put these together. And we'll talk about product development and the process in which this is made. So when we talk about the process of manufacturing, it's important to kind of talk about the equipment we use. Like I said, we got 3 of these Laguna Elite SUV CNCs. They're the FANUC operating system, along with FANUC closed loop servo motors. It's a big upgrade in a CNC is those closed loop FANUC servos. Servos are really cool because they always know where they are in space regardless of what happens. Stepper motors, if they lose a step, the machine doesn't know. You have to rehome the machine. So these are a significant upgrade over anything we've ever had by so much, and they are fantastic at manufacturing parts. That's not to say you can't get it done with something else. We did the first 10,000 Tamar router jigs on an Avid CNC. So there's lots of great equipment out there, but the more you pay, the quicker production goes. And so we spent a lot of money investing in our manufacturing facility so we could make more of these for you guys. We have our consumables, which are these bits here. We use exclusively bits and bits, aside from this big flattening bit. That thing, I don't know who I got that from. But other than that, we use all bits and bits parts. I've tried switching to other companies. I heard from somebody early on that, oh, when you get into big manufacturing, there's special bits, and it's just not true. These are fantastic. I've got thousands of bits under my belt in the last 3 years, and we track how long each one takes, and these are by far the best. So big shout out to Bits and Bits. Again, not sponsored. They're just great. On top of that, we have work holding, right, which is this Becker vacuum pump. This is the Ferrari of vacuum pumps. It's as good as it gets for this size machine. And that's really important, right? Because anybody who owns a CNC knows that work holding is so important. And, you know, I used to use hold downs and worry about crashing bits into clamps and things like that. But now we can just vacuum this down. That is with a few exceptions. The more you open up a sheet, the more holes you cut into it, the less vacuum you have, right? So that's why you buy a really big vacuum pump. So we do clamp these down sometimes in addition to the vacuum pump, but the clamps are sort of just a fail-safe so we don't lose a whole sheet that we spent 2 hours cutting and it moves on the last part, because that's when it's most likely to move, right? It has the most holes in it, most likely to move. Let's talk about how we actually manufacture this box joint. I'll talk about some of the trials and tribulations that came along with figuring it out and getting it to this point. All of our parts start on the CNC with the exception of the acrylic keys, which is cut exclusively on the lasers. The pieces you see in front of you, these are the base. That is this part here. Everything is done in one operation. So we have the tool changer behind you, and this is where manufacturing prototyping was really tough. This is a lot of tool paths. I think there's 12 or something in this. Some of those tool paths have overlapping bits where it uses the same bit. But one of the biggest things we came up with here, which I originally found on the router table, is that when you have a slot and then you cut out your part, you end up with tear out, regardless, whichever you do first. If you cut out your part first, you do your slot first, you're gonna get tear out one way or the other. So you see these very subtle curves in here, and why it makes that weird shape here at the end when it's cutting them out, that's to avoid tear out. Because if you slope a curve, you're not gonna get tear out. Same with the chamfer. You see the chamfers, we always do the chamfer before we do the cutout because it allows us to create not only a clean part, but it's sort of a fail-safe for post-production. The slot as well was an issue because we used a compression bit to cut everything out, and that has a 0.25 to 0.5 inch upcut flute on the bottom and then down cut on the top. And so when you would go past the slot, because there was only a 1/4 inch of material left, you would get tear out at the end of this slot, and it just looked ugly. So we cut everything out with a 1/4 inch down cut bit and go all the way around it. Typically we cut everything out last because the more holes you open up, the more likely you are to lose suction of the vacuum pump. So you want to do a big pass where you take it down almost to depth and you just leave a small onion skin, and then you come back at the end and you clean up that last tiny little bit, and that should hopefully keep the machine from moving. Then we do the fence. The fence is pretty straightforward. That is this 1/2 inch bolted birch piece here that goes into this slot. The one sort of cool thing we do there that we figured out as the more we manufactured is we do the chamfer first. We actually trace all the chamfers before we do any cutouts because that keeps any risk of tear out. These bits down cut are designed not to tear out on the top here, but it helps if you do a chamfer, and that helps you get a cleaner part, which cuts down on post-production. From there, we cut out the MDF, which is murder on your dust collector. Oh my God, we're cutting these. We got to clean that huge dust collector all the time. We use the forklift to pick it up and kind of drop it a 1/4 inch, and that knocks out the filters a little bit. But these parts are really important because this is where the accuracy comes in for that box joint jig. So these need to be really accurate. So we go through, we cut these out. We also cut the recesses for the slots. Now, something interesting that I learned when we were doing these is I went through maybe 30 sheets of these. We get 20 sets, 20 box joints per sheet, and it had a chamfer all the way around the piece. And I thought, okay, chamfers look great. It helps add professional quality to your pieces. But the thing I learned is because the two pieces meet here in the middle, that chamfer would cause tear out in your box joints, regardless of how fresh your spoils board was on this box joint. So we had to figure out a way in the machine to remove that chamfer, and it was basically I just drew a bigger square and then put lines just on the top of the bottom, so it just does a chamfer here, but when the bit goes around the edge, it misses. So then you get a nice clean edge here. Then, as you can see, everything is laser engraved. The spoils board piece, you get 2 of those so that you can make your own if you want to. We cut the threaded insert, the note block, and the runner on the CNC, but we do those in half sheets. Again, we run into that vacuum pump problem, right? Is with so many tiny parts, you know, we get about 240 per full sheet of plywood. We would just lose suction. Even if we clamped it down, you're still gonna get a little bit of bow in your board, and that messes up chamfers and holes and all those kinds of things. So we do a half sheet at a time, we clamp it down really good, and that allows us to use the vacuum pump and the clamps to be able to cut those out. We leave an onion skin and just cut them out very lightly at the end, so all the chamfers and holes and all those things are already done. So if anything moves, we're just cleaning up a little onion skin instead of losing a whole sheet of plywood. Same thing, nopes, runner blocks. The runners are really interesting. Let me show you something real quick. I'll be right back. This was just one Saturday morning to dial in the exact size of the runners. You run into so many different considerations and concerns when you're cutting something out with a CNC. If you go conventional or climb cut, that means you're going clockwise or counterclockwise around a part, you're gonna get different sizes because either the flutes are pulling the piece into the bit or pushing it away. So when you're looking to really dial something in, you got a lot of things you gotta worry about that affect a part by just a couple thou, but it's really important when you're doing something like this. Then from there, we head over to the laser. So let's go check those out and I'll show you how we do that. Behind me, this is 2 of our lasers. We've got a third one over here that we use as well. And this is the laser engraving jig for the threaded inserts. These are real cool because we cut them on the CNC, basically just add a little tolerance to it, create it so that it's easy for people to grab stuff out. If you just were to cut the exact shape and slide stuff in, it would create a really hard time getting them in and out. It would create sort of a vacuum, and long story short, we cut them so that they're easy to grab and easy to assemble. We do a test cut, so we have a test pass where we cut one in the top left and bottom right corner to make sure everything's aligned and square. It's very hard to align things in a laser when you're coming from the CNC because the bars that go across the laser always have a ton of play in them and there's no reference inside of a laser. People, every time I say that on Instagram, people go, why don't you just create a little thing that sits in there? It just doesn't work that way because the bed of our lasers, the bars have an 1/8 inch of play in them. So the second that gets bumped or anything like that, they're just no longer accurate. Behind me over here, we cut the acrylic keys. You can see we can get a lot out of a sheet of acrylic, and those are super accurate, and that's the benefit to cutting with a laser. Our laser's kerf is 0.05 millimeters. That is so thin, so you can put them super close together and cut them out. We also have really high pressure air for the acrylic because you're cutting with essentially fire. And so to get through a 1/4 inch material, it has to be really hot. And the problem is, the longer that takes, the more chance it has of melting together. So if you can cool that cut off very quickly, it allows you to cut through without them sticking back together. So that's probably more information than you needed. But that's how we do the laser engraving. It is not an easy feat to go from a CNC part to accurately engrave a bunch of them on the laser. But one of the things I do is I create alignment lines in my jig. So you see this line that goes across this way and this way. So if the red dot can follow those lines, you know your jig is square. And then we create an origin point that is actually cut on the CNC that we can line the laser up. It's usually right where those 2 lines meet. That's right where I put it. And allows us to pretty accurately and quickly be able to laser engrave these. So that's kind of the manufacturing process. Let's head over to Pick and Pack and see how these are put together. And this is Katz-Moses Pick and Pack on the other side of the warehouse, where we store all our products that we fulfill your orders every day. Pick and packers will use a scanner to go find a barcode in each of their own locations and then move everything to a cart. Those carts are color coded so that they know different priority, different shipping service, and different things that those orders need. Behind me you see the box joint materials where they pull from. The box joints come with hardware kits that we package up individually. That's 5 1/4-20 T-bolts, 5 1/4-20 knobs, 5 wood screws for the note block and the runner, a threaded insert, as well as the 4 MDF pieces, the base and the fence. That's all put together and put in a box. We use this eco-friendly paper that comes out of a machine that has a foot pedal. We rip it up, use it in the box, and then from there we use our activated tape. Ours has our logo on it, which is kind of fun. From there, everything gets moved to a pallet and brought back out to the warehouse, to the loading dock, where UPS, FedEx, USPS, and DHL show up every day for pickups. And that's how we get everything to you. Let's head over to the bench and talk about just a couple more things. Guys, thank you for letting me show you a little behind the scenes here and how we went from this to this. And I couldn't be more proud of my team here. We've done some incredible things. They work so hard on this stuff, and we are so excited to bring this to you. Pick it up now. Obviously, with this video, lead times are going to be a few weeks, but we're shipping daily on these things, and they really are incredible. Anything you need, please write us. We'll have some videos linked down below that teach you how to do box joints, center keyed box joints. We'll also be releasing a couple new videos here in the near future. So, guys, thanks for watching. As always, stay safe in the shop. Have a wonderful day.